All right, God bless you all for being here, and thank you for covering for me the last 2 weeks, for the Dave and for the Fred, I guess, last week. So it's good to get a breath of fresh air once in a while, right? And I needed the break. We have actually an open house today at the house I've been working on, so we hopefully will get it sold quickly. So I'm going to scoot out afterwards to get over there to get ready for that. We're in 2 Samuel chapter 10, and just to kind of review a little bit where we are, David has basically moved into Jerusalem, occupied the city, gotten his army out across Israel to recover the territory that had been given to them by God, and so he went to the boundaries and got all of that territory under his control. And then he started looking at things he could do in benevolence for those who had helped him get to where he was. So in chapter 9, we had the story about Mephibosheth, the son of Jonathan, who was given an inheritance, essentially, and a future at the king's table. And this chapter today is a similar chapter of David's reaching out in a benevolent sort of way, and we'll see that a contrast in terms of in chapter 9, that benevolence was accepted with great humility. It's actually a picture of the gospel being presented to man, and it was accepted and received gladly, and therefore that individual and the family received a huge blessing. This chapter stands in stark contrast to what happens when you don't accept the benevolence that's being offered to you from God. David representing God in this case. And so we'll start at verse 1. It came to pass after this that the king of the children of Ammon died, and Hanun his son reigned in his stead. Now let's just kind of remember who Ammon and the Ammonites are. Okay, does anybody remember where the Ammonites come from?
Lot.
What's that?
Lot.
Yeah, Lot's daughters, incestual relationship with their father, produced 2 sons, one Moab and one Ammon. Now Ammon, both of these territories that were occupied by these peoples were to the east of the Jordan River, the Moabites to the south, the Ammonites more to the north. Basically right straight across from the River Jordan eastward is where these were located. And historically the Moabites, when the children of Israel came up through, they weren't encountered so much because Israel was able to come up between the Dead Sea and the Moabites. My map is backwards to you all here, but in my mind, my visual map. But they were not. If you look in the back of your Bible at the map there, you can see probably where they were geographically. The Moabites weren't a huge resistance, but the Ammonites wouldn't let them come through. And then obviously historically also you have some interesting characters in the Bible. You have Ruth, who was a Moabite, and she was brought in and actually becomes part of the lineage of Christ. And so I think what we're looking at here is to see the Moabites and the Ammonites as very closely connected to Israel in their genealogy, coming from Abraham and coming down through. They were not just necessarily automatic enemies except by their own choice. They set themselves up in opposition. And so Ammon, the Ammonite, the Hanun, the son of this king, had come into power, and so David decides he's going to, in a good gesture, go out and send ambassadors to him to offer peace and goodwill, to offer condolences for the death of the father. And he had some good things in store for them because he wanted to basically show himself as a good neighbor. And this I think goes to the heart of who David was. David was not automatically a man of war, just interested in taking over countries and getting power. He simply wanted to define the boundaries of what was rightfully his, and then to be a good neighbor to those who were on the other side of the fence, so to speak. And there's some political parallels to that today. There's nothing wrong with being a good, strong country with good, strong borders, and then being friendly to those and helping out those who are willing to be good neighbors to you. And so, in verse 2, then said David, I will show kindness unto Hanun the son of Nahash, as his father showed kindness unto me. Here again is apparent. We don't know what the actual details were, but apparently Nahash, the father, somewhere along the way, when apparently maybe when David was a fugitive, had showed kindness to David. We don't know exactly what it was, but David was of the kind of person, he wanted to repay this, just like he did with Mephibosheth and Jonathan. He wanted to do this also to repay for Nahash's kindness. So he's got nothing but good motives here. And so David, he sent to comfort him by the hand of his servants for his father. And David's servants, think of them as ambassadors. These would be specially chosen men to represent David, came into the land of the children of Ammon. And the princes of the children of Ammon, these would be advisors, said unto Hanun their lord, Thinkest thou that David doth honor thy father, that he hath sent comforters unto thee? Hath not David rather sent his servants unto thee to search the city and to spy it out, to overthrow it? Wherefore Hanun took David's servants and shaved off the one half of their beards, and cut off their garments in the middle, even to their buttocks, and sent them away. So let's just imagine this. This was in the Arab world, this was a way to shame someone. This was a thing that they did. The beard was a very important part to a man. And can you imagine if our president sent an ambassador to a country, let's just say he's trying to reach out to, let's just use North Korea, for example. And he's trying to put out a good faith effort to build a good relationship. If our ambassadors that went to him were sent back with their clothes cut in half down to their buttocks and their beards shaved in half, how would that be received? This is exactly what happened. And again, using this chapter as a model of God reaching out in mercy to those who don't necessarily deserve it and being mistreated, this thing has happened repeatedly through history to God's messengers. Even Jesus, the greatest messenger of all, of salvation, right? And the world and evil has always looked for a way to mistreat righteousness, and will continue to do so. And so what we will see in this chapter is there's an ultimate cost of sin, and where sin fights or resists righteousness, there's an ultimate price to pay. We will see that. But I want you to also know in this passage the carefulness, the carefulness with which David comforted his ambassadors. He didn't allow them to come back and be completely embarrassed. He basically put them in what you might call a way station. We're going to see that in Jericho, and gave them an opportunity for their beards to grow out. And I want you to ask yourself this question, has in your ministry there ever been a time when you have been embarrassed or humiliated or even removed from an office or a place where you were at once in a high profile, and God has set you aside for a while in order to give you comfort, to let you grow back so that you can come back and be useful to Him. So consider that in this passage. And so let's start with verse 5. When they told it unto David, he sent to meet them because the men were greatly ashamed. And the king said, tarry at Jericho until your beards be grown, then return. And when the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David, and they did stink, what did they do? Here's another thing I want to bring into this, and then I'm going to stop for a minute and let you all have some contribution here. Remember back in 1 Samuel, I don't remember what chapter, maybe 13 seems like, but Abigail, Nabal's wife, Nabal did not receive David's messengers. And so Abigail, the wife, wisely started preparing all of this stuff and sent it out and came in a very humble way, addressing herself to David, apologizing for the actions of her husband. And what did David do? Well, he was moved by that, wasn't he? And eventually he actually took her to wife. But David's heart was to receive and to forgive. And this is the same heart that God has for us when we come in a repentant way. When we have resisted Him and we come in a repentant way, we see God's immediate willingness to forgive and not bring down judgment. And in this country, the children of Ammon had that same opportunity, but instead, they're going to stiffen, they're going to harden their hearts, and they're actually going to go out and send for reinforcements to fight against God. And that's not going to go well. Any comments so far? Bob?
In that verse 6 it said, and when the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David, and that particular, I just looked up because of when I was interested in when somebody puts the word like stank or something, what does that really mean? Mm-hmm. And in this particular case, it's from the Hebrew, and it means they were offensive morally, and that they were loathsome, odious, causing a stink to the Savior. Mm-hmm. In this particular word, the way it's interpreted. So, good. You know, there are several other times that word in the Bible, I can recall it's used in Genesis where the fish died in the river and they stank, and then they moved and they stank. But then another time when he crossed us to when he's talking about morally, it's about when Diana, when her two brothers in Genesis, and she played the part of the harlot, mm-hmm. and their brothers said that caused them to stand mm-hmm. before the Lord. The same thing. I just thought that was interesting because these people are already in a bad way mm-hmm. In the eyes of the Lord before they done what they did. And having been in the Mid-East time, spent a lot of time over there when I was in the military, you know, you cut off a man's beard, you know, that's some fighting grounds. Yeah. I mean, they'll fight you over that yeah. because it's like an honor, you know, like right. a sign of masculinity. Right. Yeah. They were definitely throwing down the gauntlet here. Yes. And the Lord sends people in our lives sometime, and though we may not physically treat them that way, mentally we do. Because we don't understand why God's sending somebody to us. We doubt their motives. Mm-hmm. We doubt their intentions. Mm-hmm. And, you know, we just have to learn to trust the Lord. You know, this thing you mentioned about someone's motives and mistrusting someone's motives, you know, even we can be guilty of that when we see someone doing good things. A lot of times we're tempted to say, I wonder why they're really doing that. They're probably trying to, you know, buddy up to this person so they can get something, you know. We can be just as suspicious about people's motives, can't we?
Yeah, this week I talked about
I've often got suspicious about like my own motive, like when I do something, and then the devil's like, why are you doing it? You're only doing it because, but I've learned to teach myself, you know, I'll stop him right there before I go for it, you know what, you're right, that's true, you know, whenever I fall for it, but But now I just say, yeah, I'm trying to forgot, you know.
Right.
Get behind
I'm so
me.
glad to see you here this morning.
I was thinking, even in the news this week, it was mentioned how it's not your intentions that matter, but how it was received or perceived from the other point. So I reckon the burden falls more on the first person to communicate clearly and to not, if the other person has received it wrongly, then we need to help them understand the truth. But that's a good point, that they had an opportunity. The simple thing is to say, I was wrong, would you possibly forgive me? That would have solved a lot of problems, but I wonder if they didn't have anybody on their side that said, hey, I don't think we should continue. Was there no one that gave some good advice, or it was all ignored?
Doesn't appear to be.
It made me why he didn't remember how David had treated his father, and how he showed his father kindness. And, you know, he allowed those around him to influence his thinking, and we have to be careful about that, because, you know, somebody will come up to us and start saying something, and by the time you get halfway through, you realize, wait a second, they're talking about somebody behind the back, so I got to disregard it. But sometimes when those words hit your ear gate, what's the next thing you think automatically when you see that person?
A negative thought.
You know, so I mean, we have to be careful
Right, that's right.
about, you know, the advice and who we surround ourselves with to get our advice and our, you know.
Right. And just to be clear, it was actually the father, the king, Nahash, who had actually been the one of the Ammonites to show kindness to David. So he could have been, there could have been, you know, his children, those around, his advisors even, could have been critical of that action. And now that he's gone, basically, you know, gone about things the way they just were going to go about it. There obviously was some animosity between the Ammonites and Israel, because that did go back all the way to Israel coming out of Egypt and coming up through there and not being allowed to come through. There was some resentment there both ways, I'm sure. But the fact that Nahash showed kindness to David meant that he was an exception of that, and so it could be that there was just opposition, you know, in that family to whether they were going to how they were going to treat Israel. Anybody else?
I think it's just, even as Brother Bob said, you have to be so careful. If a person will continually talk about other people around you, then they're probably talking about you around other people as well. They get in a perfectionist mode. The thing that should keep us humble is us knowing that we are sinners living in a sinful world, and do the very best we can to live the Christian life in this sinful flesh that we live in. And I tell you what, the thing that could have been, they could have pursued peace, but it seemed like an insignificant thing. Or to them, what they want to do is, we don't care, David, about, you know, your, so to speak, concerns about us. If they would have done that and pursued peace, rather than basically shame and warfare, they got a lot of other people involved, and thousands and thousands of people perished and died of the Syrians and other nations because of the wickedness of this group of people, and they paid for it ultimately.
I wonder if these were all younger. I wonder if their age was younger, like this, the people that were doing the wrong thing. I wonder if they were young, you know, there weren't older people that had, maybe that was the problem.
Could
they
be.
Were youths, they were immature, young.
Could be. I don't know, but they were called princes, I believe is the word that's referred to them. They were basically rulers, you know, in the country. So let's kind of so you can imagine that when they sent these men away, like as they did, they probably were just yucking it up. They just thought that was probably hilarious. But then reality sets in when they realize, oh boy, what have we done? I mean, this is Israel that has gone around and conquered pretty much everybody. In fact, just if you recall, in chapter 8, they basically got the Moabites. And I wonder if that didn't play into their suspicion. Because remember how David laid them out in ranks and killed two and kept one and put the Moabites into subjection. There may have been some suspicion that that David was going to come there, but again they would have been so much smarter to try to make peace with a ruler who obviously can overtake them. In fact, their army wasn't even that good. To think that they could stand up against David was foolhardy. And so they're going to have to go get some mercenaries. They're going to pay a lot of money in that day's currency to have the Syrians come to the rescue. Let's continue. Verse 6, and when the children of Ammon saw that they stank before David, the children of Ammon sent and hired the Syrians of Beth-rehob and Syrians of Zobah, 20,000 footmen, and of King Maacah, 1,000 men, and of Ishtob, 12,000 men. If you add all that up, that's a lot of men you got to support. Okay? And that's a high, you know what I'm going to call this? You're going to sort of spiritualize the passage a little bit here. This is the high cost of sin. You pay for it, don't you? And a lot of times what happens is you wind up, you know how one lie perpetuates a bigger lie and a bigger lie? You dig yourself into a bigger hole. It gets more and more costly. Instead of just repenting and being done with it and coming on to the right side of the equation. But here, so now they've got to support this big army. And when David heard of it, he sent Joab and all the host of the mighty men. Now let's look at this militarily speaking. Basically what's going to happen here is David has to fight a war on two fronts now. He's going to have to fight the Syrians, which are the bigger, more fierce army. And so he has to bring his best men. And David being a great general, he did exactly that. He deploys his best men against the Syrians. And in verse 8, and the children of Ammon came out. Now who put their battle in array? Did David put the battle in array, or did the children of Ammon start this fight? The children of Ammon, right? The children of Ammon came out and put the battle in array at the entering in of the gate. And the Syrians of Zobah and of Rehob and Ishtob and Maacah were by themselves in the field. When Joab saw that the front of the battle was against him, before and behind, so he's surrounded. There's no retreating. If he retreats, he's run into the Ammonites, okay? He chose of all the choice men of Israel and put them in array against the Syrians. And the rest of the people he delivered into the hand of Abishai, his brother, that he might put them in array against the children of Ammon. That's behind them. Bob, did you have a comment? Okay. Anybody comment so far? Okay. And he said, if the Syrians be too strong for me, then thou shalt help me. But if the children of Ammon be too strong for thee, then I will come and help thee. So there's a lot of cooperation going on here. You know, when we are being attacked, and especially as Satan tries to mount his resources against us at every turn, every which way you turn in society, we see his hand. We see it in our schools. We see it in our government. We see it out on the streets. We see him infiltrating our homes and in our churches. Satan is everywhere you turn, arraying his forces against us in high places.
That's good. That's good.
Isn't he? That's what he does. We cannot be afraid. We cannot fear when we know that we're on the right side. But what we have to do is we have to be smart about engaging the enemy, and we can't just wait till they come to us. David went out to meet them. He did not let them come in, build in, and make matters worse. He went after him. You got to root out sin. This is really the spiritual lesson of this passage, is you have to go after sin and root it out. And no matter how bad or how hard it looks, and how difficult the battle may appear to be, you got to be smart about it and put your best resources at the point of attack. In the military, we have this thing called massing our firepower. and you take the thing that is the most dangerous of all, and you put all the resources you can, and you throw at it and take it out. You don't just sort of piddle in here, piddle in there, piddle in there, give it a token little effort over here. You got a major thing in your life that's holding you back from serving the Lord. You've got to call in the reinforcements. You've got to call in, and you've got to coordinate with other people to get them to help you win that battle. A lot of times we try to do these things on our own, don't we?
Well, as you say, the position is vital. The higher ground and having the exact position. That's why.
Right.
As they're maybe getting prepared for battle, David positioned himself. And I love how that because probably the Syrians were more in number than the Ammonites, that is why Joab took on the battle and said that he took the choice men.
Right.
And was gonna fight against the more skilled, or probably the more numerous as well. And so, just the wisdom of this whole thing, and plus the Lord was with him. That's the difference. The Lord was with him.
And the thing of it is, even though the Lord was with them, you're right, this battle is probably David's most difficult battle. Historians say none of the battles of all the ones he fought were as difficult as this situation here. So even though the passage makes it seem easy, it wasn't an easy situation at all. There's a parallel passage in Chronicles that pretty well matches this one as well. I think it's in chapter 19, I believe, if you want to cross-reference it, Bob.
And spiritually speaking, we have to do the same thing. We have to put ourselves in a position to be victorious.
Right.
That's right. That's right.
If you have something that you know is a weakness in your life, you stay as far away from that as you can. Don't put yourself in a position where you're going to be tempted or you're going to be weak or give in.
That's good.
And God will give you the strength to do that, no matter how difficult it is, just like He did for the children of Israel. If they looked and said, wait a second, if these people are too much for us, I'll call for help. Mm-hmm. But they already had help. And lots of times we get in those positions, we think, well, I've been a Christian for 30-some odd years. I can handle that.
Right.
No, you can't.
That's right.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
You still got to position yourself. You got to ask for help when you need it from the Lord. And that's just further than like the spiritual application of this, is we have to position ourselves also.
Right. When we fight properly, biblically, we learn in the New Testament that the gates of hell will not prevail against that. When we go after sin, we're going to be resisted. Just like the Ammonites built up a resistance against this attack. We're going to be resisted. There's no question that we'll be resisted. It's not going to be easy. But if we mount up a proper attack, the gates of hell cannot prevail against us, right?
But I think that in this as well too, knowing this, as you said, that this was probably the most difficult of all battles that David had. And entering, and not trying to jump ahead, but entering into the next chapter, all that had to be defeated was this major city of Ammon. And that is when David, obviously, was weary, just weary. And this weariness is a lot of times is the key point at which Satan really attacks.
Yeah, we're slowly moving towards chapter 11, and I face that chapter with fear and trepidation. Not because I'm afraid to read it, but I'm afraid, because I feel so bad for David. And I see how vulnerable we all are. That's right. As men.
That's right. No matter how godly are you vulnerable.
Even after you've had such great success, this is one of the things we'll be talking about, is the complete vulnerability we have when we relax, when we let down our guard. We just cannot afford to, because Satan will, though we may have victory in one area, he will find a weak spot and he will go after it. Not to telegraph chapter 11. Dave.
I was thinking about 1 Peter 5:8. Be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, as a roaring lion, walketh about, seeking someone he may devour. Not just trip up, destroy. Whom? Then what we should do is resist, steadfast in the faith, faith, knowing that the same afflictions are accomplished in your brethren that are in the world. But the God of all grace, who hath called us into his eternal glory by Christ Jesus, after that you have suffered a while, he will make you perfect, establish, strengthen, settle you. To him be glory and dominion forever and ever.
Amen.
So Satan's right now, he's not just taking it easy. We had this lady at our work Bible study. She said, ever since I've been coming to Bible study, I've had opposition in dreams, and there's been negative things happening to her since she's been coming. So the enemy is active.
Yes. Ed, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I'm just reading in verse 12 there. It's important that leaders have surround themselves with good men. And here we see that Joab is saying, the Lord do that which seemeth good to him. So it's not just David that's looking to the Lord, it's his general, Joab. He's got good men surrounding him.
Yeah.
And that's important, that we can support the pastor as he does his job.
Amen.
Delegates responsibilities. He has good men that he can depend on.
That's right. Amen. That's right.
I think we can see it here, and we can see it in other instances in David's life, but I think one of his strengths is that he gives no provision for failure. I mean, if you look at his battle plan, he says, if they're too strong, we'll come help you. Mm-hmm. Vice versa, you come help us. But he never gave here's what we're going to do if they overtake us. He didn't even give that option.
Yeah.
And that speaks a lot to his faith. Mm-hmm. Same thing with Goliath. I don't think the thought ever crossed his mind that he wasn't going to defeat Goliath.
Yeah.
And that's something I think that we need more of in our own lives, is that where we just don't give provision for failure. I think a lot of times we like to have a back door. We like to blame whatever it might be. I won't list things, but we like to have we're going to seek after God, we're going to go after this sin, we're going to try to overcome it, but if we don't, it's, this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and, I guess we'll get up and try again. Mm-hmm. But, I think we can learn from David.
Amen.
We need to approach spiritual conflicts, spiritual battles, with the mindset that we are going to be victorious through Christ. One of my mentors, he always says, I always win, or I never lose because my God always wins. And having that mindset of everything I do is a win because of who I serve, not because I'm great and I'm some great champion, but because of who we serve. Everything we do can be a win. Nothing we do is a failure because of that. And when you approach conflict with that mindset, it really does change the outcome.
Yes, I appreciate that. I appreciate what you just said. I'm going to speak to the other side of the coin, that yet, in spite of his confidence in winning, they didn't leave anything to chance, as you said, because they acknowledged that one side or the other could start to fail. And I think that if we would take this to heart, we would be saying to each other, if you see me failing, please come and help me. Help bolster me up.
It's just like Moses sitting upon a rock and Aaron and Hur on both sides. Those arms went down, they started, and you say, well, why on earth? And of course we know this, in talking about the faith element, you see the difference it was not just that he had his hands up. What did he have in his hands?
The rod.
The rod of God.
The staff.
That was called the rod of God. And so that was an emblem of faith. When that faith was lifted up, when that faith started to decline, that's when they started to be defeated. And that is right. And no man, I remember that. I can't remember. Bell wrote that no man is an island. If you've never read that, it's just, it's really important. We need each other. We need each other. We need each other to pick each other up when we, at times we fail. We need each other to pray for one another.
Yes.
We need to pray for Kathy and others in the situation. We need to pray for one another. We need to lift each other up. We don't need to step on each other when we're down. That's what the devil does.
Right.
We need to take those opportunities. You know, we're so prone as Christians when we see our brothers or sisters fall in a situation, we're prone to immediately look at that with more of a critical eye than a helpful eye. And you know, the Lord has spoken to Israel telling them that. Then my first thought, he said, look, he said, I allowed you to have the discernment to see that in your brother or sister, so you could pray for them and be a help to them,
Right.
not kick them when they're down.
Right.
Because the Bible, for instance, take heed lest he that think you stand and fall. And I'm no better than anybody else. And I realize that before the grace of God, in any situation, there go I. And accountability is a wonderful thing. That's something the pastor has emphasized over and over since been here, is accountability. And I have people who are my accountability partners, and they hold me accountable, other than my wife. But they hold me accountable. I'm glad they do.
Amen.
And I do the same to them. And we shouldn't be afraid to go to a brother and pass that to a brother. I just feel that maybe you need some help. Is there something I can pray for? I'll never forget the guy that was named Chris. That passed away. He used to come around and say, "There's something I can pray for you this week." And I thought, wow. I mean, it didn't matter who you were. If he spoke to you, he'd ask, and he'd know me. He'd come around and ask me how I was going. And I think we should have to do it for each other. Like Pat said, we need each other. And the days are fast approaching when it's going to be even more important.
Yes.
As we're attacked as Christians more and more. As you watch the news and see Christianity is under attack in America.
Yeah.
You think it's not, you're fooling yourself, and you put your head in the sand. There's going to come a day when we're going to have our brothers and sisters in Christ to make it.
That's right. One of the things that I'm trying to hold myself accountable to is really around this very issue. When we're in a position of leadership, whether we teach a Sunday school class or whether we lead a men's Bible study, in this case, facilitate a men's Bible study, whatever our role is, I think we have to be careful that we don't see this and we don't build this as a pyramid where we put ourselves at the top and then everybody is related to just us. But what we need to cultivate, I believe, is a network of relationships with each other. That's what we need to encourage. So that when the leader is gone, this is the fundamental difference between the American military and the Russian, the old Soviet Union style of worship. We capitalized on this principle. Robert can tell you that if you don't already know, you probably do because you're military too, is that the Russian military, as soon as you took out their leader, they didn't know what to do. We teach our men that this is the mission, and if I'm taken out as the leader, you carry on. This is the mission. These are your marching orders, and this is the mission. You go do it. And so our men will take initiative. Okay. You push responsibility down to the lowest level you can. And you make sure that they understand what the mission is and they will continue to go forward. We need to do the same thing with each other. We have a responsibility to each other to hold each other accountable. And I have to admit, I have failed way too much in this area. But it's an area I'm aware of, and I'm trying to get my own personal life in order so that I can have the time to devote to you all, But my heart and my goal is to be able to if I have any influence on you men at all, it's this, that we build amongst each other a strong accountability to be there for each other. And that we then take that out where we can and replicate that same model. Discipleship is teaching faithful men who will teach others also. If I have any influence on you at all, it's that you will go do the same thing in your sphere of influence. Because that's how we survive. Any comments?
I'd just like to touch on the part that remember the kindness of others. This is where David was remembering about how Jonathan was so kind to him. And that brought on a whole lot of conflict. These people misread him. They said he was spying on them when he was trying to be nice and kind. So look out. When you do good, there comes the devil to try to mess up everything that you're doing. But it's a wonderful thing to remember the goodness, especially the goodness of the Lord. So often the Lord blesses us and we are on cloud nine, so to speak, one moment, and then the next moment we're back down in the dumps. We done forgot all about it. Yeah. He said that the people get their bellies full and they rise up to play. But we should remember what God done for us yesterday, and that should give us hope for today. And just remember the blessings of the Lord, and that just builds you up within itself. You know, David had so much trouble being good, even with Saul. He was being nice, and Saul was trying to kill him all the time. So that's the way it is when we do good, but we should not fret ourselves when we do well. We should be thankful. Praise God.
Amen. Thank you. So let's read through the rest of this chapter in just the last few minutes we have. And what we're basically going to see is we're going to see the judgment of God on the Ammonites as a result of their fighting Israel. So in verse 13, and Joab drew nigh, and the people that were with him unto the battle against the Syrians, and they fled before him. And when the children of Ammon saw that the Syrians were fled, then fled they also before Abishai, and entered into the city. So Joab returned from the children of Ammon, and came to Jerusalem. And when the Syrians saw that they were smitten before Israel, they gathered themselves together, and they just can't give up, can they? And Hadarezer sent and brought out the Syrians that were beyond the river, and they came to Helam and Shobach, and the captain of the host of Hadarezer went before them. And when it was told David, he gathered all Israel together and passed over Jordan and came to Helam. And the Syrians set themselves in array against David and fought with him. And the Syrians fled before Israel, and David slew the men of 700 chariots of the Syrians and 40,000 horsemen, and smote Shobach, the captain of their host, who died there. And when all the kings that were servants to Hadarezer saw that they were smitten before Israel, they made peace with Israel. That was really smart. And served them. So the Syrians feared to help the children of Ammon anymore. They learned their lesson. But you know what? There's coming a day when there's going to be another big battle, and this little 40,000 horsemen is going to look like a drop in the bucket when we see blood rising to the horses' bits. You know, one day God's going to, in His wrath, fight the big battle, and He's going to win that battle. And so what we can know from this and take confidence is that as long as we stay in the battle, God will fight our battle for us. And we must take courage. But we must be there for each other, and we must we must fight smartly.
Smite if you don't listen. Smite.
Yes.
Could you, this poem came out years ago that is so befitting of this. It's a poem, Edward Self. Would you read that and just listen to this? This pictures exactly what we're talking about.
This right here.
Yes.
This I beheld, or dreamed it in a dream. There spread a cloud of dust along along a plain, and underneath the cloud, or in it, raged a furious battle, and men yelled, and swords shocked upon swords and shields. A prince's banner wavered, then staggered backward, hemmed by foes. A craven hung along the battle's edge and thought, had I a sword of keener steel, that blue blade that the king's son bears? But this blunt thing, he snapped and flung it from his hand, and lowering, crept away and left the field. Then came the king's son, wounded, sore bestead, and weaponless, and saw the broken sword, hilt buried in the dry and trodden sand, and ran and snatched it, and with battle shout, lifted afresh, he hewed his enemy down, and saved a great cause that heroic day. That's great. With the broken sword that someone else discarded, won the day. I like that. Who wrote that?
Edward Sill. That's one of the, he was one of the great American poets.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, listen, it's 8 o'clock, men. We must array ourselves in battle and go out and fight.
Hallelujah.
But see what might seem like just an innocuous chapter in Scripture has for us when we look into it and ask the Holy Spirit to show us why He put it there for us.
Wonderful Word of God.
Ed, any last comments? That you're just dying to get out? Dave.
Not dying, but, you know, real quickly, there in verse 7 talks about when this conflict first started that David heard of it and he sent Joab and all the army of the mighty men. And this is kind of a story or a tale about Joab, because Joab didn't have David beside him.
Yeah.
And yet Joab focused on the Lord.
Right.
And he was even willing to divide his army and take on an enemy that was greater in number. But yet his focus was on the Lord. And he did not back down from battle.
Right. Yeah.
And if there was one thing that we as followers of Christ, as men of homes, as men as part of this church, that we cannot back down from the battle.
That's right.
That's good.
And it will appear,
That's good.
it will appear this is a hopeless case. It will appear that the enemy is greater.
Mm-hmm.
It will appear that, you know, what in the world are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we're going to fall down on our knees and we're going to pray. And the prayer of a righteous man availeth much. And you know, God doesn't promise us a life of calm.
Yeah.
So if you think that's what this Christian life is all about, you're grossly mistaken. So, men, I just encourage you guys that, and we are to be beside each other, and do not be afraid to ask for help.
Right.
You know, don't let your pride come in and keep you from that. I need help in this area.
Pride goeth before a fall.
That's right.
Right.
But we must be prepared for that.
Yes. Amen. Okay,
On
Brother
that
Ed.
note, let's turn to page 499. Am I a soldier of the cross? We'll sing all 4 verses. 499. It's a short song, but let's sing all 4 verses.